Thank you, everyone. Hello, hi. So yes, I'm Havi Hoffman, and this is not the docs, my talk about content and voice on a developer blog. It's a real honor to be here today, my first Write the Docs conference, my second conference talk ever, thank you, share some observations with you from my decade of working in developer relations as an editor and wrangler of content. I'm not a technical writer. These days, as a member of Mozilla's developer outreach team, I manage Mozilla Hacks, a blog for web developers. In the first 4 months of 2018, we published 38 posts by 29 authors and generated nearly 1.5 million views, and we're growing. I'd like to take a quick moment to ask a couple questions about you. Eric did a lot of the legwork for me, but how many bloggers in the room? How many people write for blogs? Great, thank you, thank you. And how many people here have ever given a talk at a conference or event? Oh, wow, awesome. You see there's a relationship between blogging and conference speaking, a relationship that I'll be referring to throughout this talk, because the connection between written and spoken word is a key dynamic in the work I do, and in the intertwinkled stories I'm going to share with you today. Developers, designers, documentarians, and DevRel types like me who communicate domain knowledge in so many ways. We all write. Many of us speak publicly. So what is the difference between the two? You'll find wonderful speakers. I'm thinking now of Saran Yitbarek, of Code Newbies, or Deconstruct's Gary Bernhardt, who insist emphatically that a talk is not a blog post. And others who'll tell you, as Sarah May did recently in some CFP writing advice, that if you can write a blog post, you can craft a talk. But whatever your perspective on storytelling, spoken aloud or read on a page, I believe there's as much appetite for diverse voices and points of view in blogging about software as there is for diverse speakers at tech conferences. And I've seen that an editor with the right skills and temperament can attract and empower many voices, whether spoken or written. So I'll take a closer look at the role of an editor in an engineering environment. It takes non-technical skills to set a tone that's respectful, reliable, inclusive, to articulate the difference between a puff piece and a story that solves a real problem for a real developer, or explain why the canonical guide to keystroke mapping for smart remotes probably belongs in the manual and not on the blog. So the value we add as editors, it's incredibly hard to measure and make visible. I'll describe the nuances then of how it translates into what I do day to day, and I'll close with a new idea for blogging that's recently grabbed my attention. But first, Denise. I'm giving today's presentation in remembrance, in honor of a friend, Denise Graveline, a blogger and longtime TEDx, TEDMed speaking coach from Washington, D.C. Denise offered us insight and encouragement in the earliest days of Mozilla Tech Speakers, a program I co-founded 3 years ago that supports volunteer web advocates to give talks and workshops at developer events around the world. In 2016, Denise coached 25 tech speakers at our first ever speaker meetup in Berlin. And last year, she helped me with my first conference talk. And I survived, and I'm here. I hope to work with Denise as I develop this talk. She was deft, fearless, kind. We spoke of Write the Docs the very last time we talked in late January. I knew she'd been ill, but when I learned of her passing barely 2 weeks after our last call, I felt profoundly abandoned and unprepared. That is what loss means. I decided that the best thing I could do with this grief would be to channel it into this talk as a way to lean on Denise one more time for the confidence she instilled. And as a reminder to all of us that if you can share what you know to help others, which is really what documentarians do, right? And what Denise Graveline did, then you too will live on in the hearts and minds of the people you help long after you are dust. So if you remember one thing from this talk, remember that. Thank you. It's about as real as I know how to get. Denise kept a blog. This dedication has relevance in other ways, as you'll see. Denise kept a blog called The Eloquent Woman. In her work, she embodied that eloquence and brought it out in others. She shared the skills of preparation and presentation, the art of being oneself as a public speaker, no matter the obstacles, inner or outer, and I'll speak more about those as well. Her blog collected speeches by women who spoke out despite all the forces trying to suppress us. She created the Eloquent Woman's Index of over 250 speeches by women, from Amelia Earhart's A Woman's Place in Science to Portland's own Ursula Le Guin, who also passed on this winter. It was Ursula Le Guin who said many years ago in a famous commencement speech, "When women speak truly, they speak subversively. They can't help it. We are volcanoes. When we women offer our experience as our truth, as human truth, all the maps change. There are new mountains." So it's out of these new mountains and against some odds that I come to you today to share what I know and to map some territory together. My daily context is the blog I manage, Mozilla Hacks, closely aligned with the vast and venerable MDN WebDocs website, which I'm sure many of you know, and the many engineering projects, large and small, that go on at Mozilla. We cover a broad swath of technical territory, up and down the stack, in and out of the browser. But rather than dazzle you with the renewed relevance of Mozilla these days and the resurgence of the splendid Firefox, a story that others can tell with much greater authority, I'm going to speak here today from my own unlikely personal story. The story of a writer and an editor who's always felt like an outlier in an industry that skews young, male, and entitled, and nowhere more so than in Silicon Valley, where I've lived and worked since 1999. I think, though, that my experience is not entirely unique. So let me tell you about Gloria Duomo. In the autumn of 2015, a colleague at Mozilla connected me with his Outreachy intern. Outreachy is a program you may have heard of that provides paid 3-month remote internships for people from groups traditionally represented in tech and in open source. Peter wanted Hacks to publish a blog post by his intern. Gloria was a computer engineering student at Piraeus University of Applied Sciences. Fast forward 3 years almost, Gloria has now completed her engineering studies, defending her undergrad thesis. As a Mozilla tech speaker, she's given talks at conferences in Belgium, England, Greece, and Italy, and she still blogs. Our backgrounds and life experiences could hardly be more different, and yet Gloria and I share common ground. She practices everyday empathy by means of active listening, and I practice empathic editorial. we both understand more than a little about luck. The luck that allowed us to meet at an opportune moment, and the earned luck of outsiders who find themselves with an entry ticket to a club we never imagined belonging to, the tech industry, the people who make the internet. So luck like this comes with an anti-pattern I'm pretty sure you've heard of, imposter syndrome. An anti-pattern I'll speak more about in just a moment, but first, in March, I came across a Scientific American article titled, "The Role of Luck in Life Success is Far Greater Than We Realized." The piece describes a pioneering effort to quantify the roles of talent and luck in successful careers. Two physicists and one economist designed a mathematical model that found that mediocre but lucky people tend to have more success, career success, than people who are more talented but less lucky. The model advises that the best funding strategy for business innovation is to focus not so much on talent as on diversity. That it's worth investing in people who are not necessarily excellent like you, and in people who might be outliers, like Gloria or me. In fact, I've been incredibly lucky more than once in my life, being at the right place at the right time, with better than reasonable access and just enough of a good education to get myself a foot in the door in the heady days of Web 1.0. Yet for all that, the feelings associated with imposter syndrome, the sense that I don't quite fit in among wizards who can commit code from a smartphone while riding a bicycle, or generate memes from their wristwatch, or install fonts at a boarding gate, that sense of having some inadequacies to hide has stayed close, like Pigpen's cloud, cloaking my light. When I moved back to the Bay Area in 1995, I had an ISDN internet connection, which gave me a huge advantage in access. And I'd been trained from childhood to think in hyperlinks and understand the notion of a web of documents and the power of network effects. So my skills, I could write a sentence, I could turn a phrase, I could spot a story or a character, and I had a tale or two of my own to tell. I landed a contract job, writing blurbs and cataloging websites for a search company. That's where the blogs category comes in. And I've been at it ever since, curating and creating content for the web, and programs and events for people who write code and build software. I fell in love with blogs and blogging early on, as they evolved out of the unlikely marriage of changelogs and personal home pages, from GeoCities to LiveJournal and movable type, to Blogger and TypePad, to WordPress, Tumblr, Medium, and back to WordPress, where I still live many hours of my work week. So here I am, a woman in tech, 42 years old when I got my first job on the internet, so you do the math. Over the years, I've taken pains to lie low, pushing others into the limelight onto a stage like this, or a page, or a bookshelf, where I never felt I fully belonged. Imposter syndrome, right? Lately, though, I've challenged myself to become more visible, to take credit for my own work, to see if what I have to say, what I know, might help others express themselves better and collaborate more effectively. One of the wisdoms that maybe seasoned oldsters like me can bring to the workplace is an understanding of just how lucky we are, we who are knowledge workers in tech these days. We have privileged positions, and with luck comes responsibility, not entitlement. In our industry, I see an epidemic of imposter syndrome and a consistent undervaluing of humility and dependability, the skills that get real work done, that ship software, right? Subtle skills. Let's give those skills the respect they deserve. According to Wikipedia, the term soft skills first showed up in a print in a US Army manual in 1972. I bring my own quirky kit of soft skills to the editor's role. An inexhaustible fascination with language, deep muscle memory for wordsmithing in English, and a knack for names and faces. Over the years, I've helped programmers write books and articles and talk about what they were building. And I've thought a great deal about this support role of mine on the web, helping sultans of software find their voice. In pondering this talk, I discovered the work of Margaret Heffernan, a former BBC producer turned 5-time CEO turned business writer and speaker. She thinks wisely about soft skills. And like me, she believes that we all benefit when openness is embedded in workplace culture. It's a bigger deal than storytelling or persuasion. In a TED Talk about alternatives to the corporate pecking order, Heffernan describes a workplace where anyone in the organization could obtain an answer to a timely knowledge question in 17 minutes or less. SAP had been creating a transparent environment across their businesses, removing forced ranking and the mindset of a competitive winner-take-all culture. They gave people opportunities and incentives to be friendly and get to know each other. Information flowed to where it was needed because people were motivated to help each other across the entire org. Helpfulness coded into culture. So I'll tie that back to the work of the Hacks blog, the work I do. I think we can agree that open source culture has its own version of hierarchical pecking orders sometimes, and decentralized collaboration definitely has unique challenges and protocols of helpfulness. At Mozilla, as makers of the Firefox browser, web developers and designers are alpha customers and our most rigorous consumers. So with this vast potential audience of designers and developers seeking many flavors of help and information, it's possible to share a range of expertise and speak to multiple segments and communities of interest. A sprawl of topics means that the voices of many technical Mozillians can be heard. Now, every organization needs people who can find and tell stories that share knowledge and seed conversations. People who tend to generate interesting news. So in publishing Hacks, we build a channel for these storytellers and their narratives. Some of them are technical writers telling their stories too. And we share them with the rest of the web. So I publish the work of amazing colleagues, and I look out for new voices everywhere. The most significant dynamic, and the one I try to keep top of mind all the time, is the conversation between reader and writer, and how I can grease it gracefully. Originally, blogs belonged to single authors, but today the genre encompasses highly designed online publications as well. So Mozilla Hacks has a kind of down-home look and feel, but don't be fooled. Our goal is to open minds and influence developer behavior, and in so doing, help keep the web open and accessible for all. An editor who manages a multi-author, multi-stakeholder publication plays many roles. As Jen Giacone Cruz's tweet describes, and she writes, I'll read this one, textual microsurgeon, ego tamer, fact guardian, common sense sorceress, cognitive magician, content maven, writes. too. Our role is intermediary as much as gatekeeper, right? I help the writer communicate as clearly and effectively as possible in her own words and voice. And I help the reader get good value too, from time invested in discovery and then in reading. So the usual best practices apply. Don't bury the lead. Close with a call to action. Remove unnecessary words. Simplify language. But best practice needn't mean a linguistic monoculture. Voice emerges from scores of small decisions that favor individual choice over rigid stylistic consistency. I let British English and spelling exist adjacent to American usage, though not in the same post. I'm comfortable with a range of tone and degrees of formality, and I've grown super vigilant in the use of inclusive and accessible language. Sometimes a person's native language syntax slips in, overlaying the English with a certain je ne sais quoi. Let it stay. I believe this builds trust. I want the reader to think this was written by a human like me. I want the writer to say, you make me sound like myself, only better, right? The most important thing an editor can do is establish context. It's what links reader and writer most deeply. There's a great conference talk by Erin McKean, who will be here on stage tomorrow, and it's called Making the Implicit Explicit. The title nails it. Erin cites research from psychologist Jean Piaget showing that we're very likely to overestimate the extent to which another person's knowledge mirrors our own. We tend to think that other people know exactly what we know, and they do not. What's implicit for me is not implicit for you. This can be a challenge if you're a domain expert immersed in your subject or project. You may not know exactly what it is that other people need to know to follow along. So we make the implicit explicit by providing context. At the semantic level of editing, it's what I look for first. Links work to establish context. They're orientation aids. So are section headers, introductions, illustrations, bullets, resource lists, embeds. If you're writing or speaking, locate your territory on a map your audience has seen before. And if the maps are new, annotate, lead by example. Which brings me to my closing directive. Experiment. Always explore and experiment, or you'll be obsolete soon. Embrace new formats, new topics, and new tools. In January, the Rust community team, engaged in building and extending the Rust programming language, announced a decentralized call for blog posts to collect feedback on their 2018 roadmap. Over 100 posts came in, tagged Rust 2018. The team read them all, and their inputs informed the plan and the priorities. A contributor built the Read Rust website to aggregate and redistribute these posts. They're calling this project the Contentotron. But open channel topical blogging by any name seems like a brilliant way to feed serendipity and make decentralized participation easier, a way to discover articulate new voices in your own communities and to channel verbosity and strong opinion constructively. It's an experiment I'm planning to try, because some ideas are contagious and beg to be copied and tested and tweaked. So I'll let you know about this one. I'd like to close now with what Denise Graveline said to a room full of tech speakers, meeting in person for the first time, all of us far from home, at the opening of our workshop. She said, "Public speaking is a risk that you take every time you get up to speak. And every time someone speaks, you all will be learning with them." So I hope you've all been learning with me today about the hard-to-measure impact of the soft skill of helpfulness in the work we all do as technical communicators. And, I get 2 more minutes? Oh, sorry. And also how the know-how and the knack for doing that work is sometimes found among industry outsiders, folks with hybrid skills and unlikely backgrounds. And there's great satisfaction in sharing what we know and what luck has given us. And so I'm really happy for this chance to spread some ideas with you today. And finally, if you came to this talk hoping to learn more about Mozilla's work, or if you have an idea for an article that you think would be a great fit for Mozilla Hacks, or if you want to ask me about a couple of contract writing positions that are happening now on the MDN Docs team, please come find me here later today or tomorrow or on the internets. I'd love to talk with you. Thank you all so much for your attention.